أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن أحسن قولا ممن دعا إلى الله وعمل صالحا وقال إنني من المسلمين ولا تستوي الحسنات ولا السيئة ادفع بالتي هي أحسن فإذا الذي بينك وبينه أدوات كان ولي حميم. صدق الله العظيم. Allah says, who is better in speech than the one who calls to Allah, works righteousness, and says, I am one of those who bow in Islam. Nor can goodness and evil be equal. Repel evil with what is better, then he will be between whom thee was hatred, become as it were thy friend and intimate. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another video from Islam for Europeans. So I wanted to talk about the Canadian government's proposed online hate speech bill, which, if approved, if passed, would result in a $20,000 to $50,000 fine for what they call online hate speech, and why we as Muslims should not support this bill at all. It's going to have the exact opposite effect of what is intended, and is going to ruin our own right of free speech here in the West as Muslims. It's going to inflame tensions and give ammunition to anti-Islam groups. And it's going to stifle any dialogue between Muslims and Westerners regarding Islam, Muslims themselves regarding Islam, and Westerners themselves regarding Islam. So so if you saw my video last week with Brother Bilal Harding on the features, he astutely pointed out that Muslims begging the government to end Islamophobia makes the Muslim community look very weak, right? So it makes us look like we are a people who are not able to defend ourselves in the street. And he rightly compared the Muslims and the way they look in trying to lobby the government and beg the government to end Islamophobia with other groups who do not try to do this type of action at all, like the Sikh community or the Chinese Canadian community. Right? So nobody messes with them, right? If try to attack a Sikh person on the street in Brampton and see if you make it a couple of blocks, right? So they are people who know how to defend themselves. And we're not saying that Muslims don't, but it definitely makes us look this way when we're trying to lobby the government. And I'll talk more about this later. The most non-Muslims in Canada hate the government. And the more Muslims try to, it appears, ally themselves with them, the more it's going to cause dislike. But that was regarding Islamophobia itself, but nothing specific as this. So this proposed bill is even worse because it basically prevents us from defending our religion on a theological basis, right? So according to the bill, they're defining hate speech as detestation or vilification of a person or a group. Okay, so this group is, given that this definition is just so subjective, really, what we consider as Muslims as normal dialogue, right, would be considered hate speech by other groups, right? Think about Islam and how we are supposed to feel about polytheism, right? Including the fact that the Christians believe that Jesus, Isa, peace be upon him, is the Son of God. We as Muslims are supposed to hate that fact. We're supposed to hate polytheism, right? We don't hate the person, we don't hate the people, right? And we as Muslims, we may understand this, but the common non-Muslims, they may not understand this at all, right? And that may result in Muslims, if we talk about these things, us being fined ourselves, right? So, and think about different lifestyles that we're against as Muslims, right? And again, we don't hate the person or the people, but there are certain lifestyles that we do not find acceptable in our religion. What's stopping us from being fined for that as well, right? And if you do move the goalposts, if you do say, let's say Muslims do say something hateful regarding a lifestyle or a belief online, right? And then the government says, okay, well, we're not going to fine you. We're going to change it and make an amendment to this hate speech bill. What's going to stop other anti-Islam groups from doing the same thing? They don't have to say we hate Muslims, or we, now they can say they hate Islam, or they hate Ramadan, or they hate Zakat, or they hate the jizya, and then they can turn around and say, oh, well, this is the same thing when Muslims say we hate polytheism, right? So there's no objective standard; it's all subjective. And if we're going to apply the same goalposts for our belief system, anti-Islam groups are going to be able to do the same thing if they move the goalposts in that regard. Okay. Yeah. So, what if the same liberal Muslims who lobbied for these hate speech laws get fined, right, for something that they tweet that they put out, or something they put out on Facebook regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right? We've already seen, liberal Muslims at the university level have their posts removed, or get fined, or get kicked out of grad school, or get in hot water because of something they said there. And that's just, you might lose your job or something like that. But with this proposed hate speech bill, you might be $20,000 to $50,000 in the hole, which basically going to ruin your life and the life of everybody around you, right? So there's something else to think about as well. And in this hate speech bill, there's nothing said about retroactive social media posts. So is there a grandfather clause? Can they take tweets or social media, Facebook posts you said 2-3 years ago, and then fine you for that? Or what if somebody retweets something that you said 2-3 years ago? What if someone takes a tweet you did from 2-3 years ago about the IP conflict, and then just changes and doctors the date on it? So it's just a can of worms. Who knows? And again, there's lots of people who are after us, especially the da'is, such as myself, and Halal Homer, and the online Muslim Dawah groups. There's all these people going after us, and who knows what kind of tactics they can use using these hate speech laws, right? And even if you don't get fined, maybe there's a way to protest against these hate speech. Let's say if you get fined 20 grand, and there's a way you can appeal it. You're still taking away your time, your money, your resources in order to appeal that. And if you're working a full-time job like I am, you will not have the time nor the resources to do that, right? So it's just, like I said, it's just a can of worms that never ends, right? And you may think that the Trudeau government, you might think, oh, well, they like Muslims and they would never do this to Muslims. Well, what if they sign this hate speech bill, and the Conservative Party, which probably they will, wins the next election in Canada by a landslide and gets a majority government? They'll be able to take the same hate speech bill and use the same law to crack down on the Muslim community for posts that they said about our religious beliefs, or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or any other foreign conflict in the Muslim world, right? So, like I said, as we saw with deplatforming, this can affect one's ability to get their message heard, right? But these hefty fines, they can not only ruin not just your life, but it can affect your loved ones who had nothing to do with it. Yeah, and for us in the Muslim community, like I said, who run these YouTube channels on shoestring budgets, while the NCCM has gobs of money to spend, these fines could basically bankrupt somebody. So we wouldn't be able to function as da'is, to the Anglosphere anymore. I know for me, if this bill ever came to pass and I would be fined for this amount, I would not be able to run Islam for Europeans anymore, right? It's not just the fine, right? It's the fact that we would be reluctant to discuss any controversial topics in our religion, or with other people. And it might not just be something that we say on our channel. It could just be interviewing or debating someone on our channel. So it might not even be us that said it, but somebody else, right? So just lots of things to think about here. And a lot of us would just basically refrain from having these discussions in the first place. Not because we do get fined, but just there's always the looming threat possibility that you could get fined. So, I mean, this goes for my channel. This goes for Madman Luke's. This goes for Sultan's Sneakers. This goes for Claire Kaw. We are the people who are on the front lines of trying to explain Islam to Westerners, right? And the Muslim community itself. We are the ones trying to explain our faith and dispel those misconceptions in the public sphere. And in that public sphere, you're going to get people who hold negative thoughts about Islam, right? I just had a conversation with a British nationalist a few days ago on Claire's channel, and it went really well. I was able to answer his questions on Islam, and, questions that he would not feel comfortable asking to everyday Muslims on the street, without fear of being called a bigot, right? And he said we agreed on 95% of the things, right? So that's how you lower Islamophobia, right? But what this proposed bill would do is completely stifle those conversations on the internet, because there would always be the threat that you could be 20 to 50 grand. Okay, so that's one point. But let's take a look at what will happen to Muslims to people who don't like Muslims who do get fined, right? So let's say that, an Islamophobic person on the internet, they post something about Islam and terrorism, or the age of Aisha, or any type of controversial subject in Islam, or something that Muslims did, and they end up getting fined, 20 to 50 grand by the government. They may have to sell their house. They may have to not be able to pay their kids' tuition. They may not be able to pay for their surgery, right? If this happens to them, do you honestly think that they're going to like Muslims after this, right? I mean, the first thing that they're going to say is, okay, where can I join the next anti-Islam militia, right? So, I mean, then people are going to hear about it around town. I mean, if it affects their family, then their families are going to know about it, and everyone around them, and word will get around, right? And, these stories that are going to happen are going to turn basically into recruiting videos for the anti-Islam crowd, such as Faith Goldie, Gavin McInnes, Ezra Levant, and their subscribership on their alternative social media platforms are only going to increase, right? And that's another point. I mean, non-Muslims with dissident opinions on the government, on Islam, on Muslims, on immigration. These people used to be on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, where there is at least the possibility that we can interact and dialogue with them, as Muslims, even if it's just text on a screen, at least you're able to get your message across. But with these new laws, what they're going to do is all the people who think that way, who don't like us, they're all going to move away from these platforms like Twitter and Facebook, and they're going to move on to alternative social media sites and blogs that are not monitored by the government. Okay, and then they're just going to be amongst angry people with even more hateful ideologies, who don't, who are less analytical. They're just going to be like these 1.0 grugs who hate Muslims, and it's just going to be this ever deepening echo chamber. So basically, what you're doing with this law is you're going to create 1,000 Nathaniel Veltmans, basically. And since their anger is going to be so high, they're not going to go after the government. They're not going to go after the members of parliament. They're not going to go after the police. That would be, suicide. So they're going to go after the most easiest visible target. And in this case, it's going to be visible Muslim men and women. Right? So, and that brings me to another point. Groups like CARE and the NCCM, their whole existence relies on the fact that Islamophobia is here, there, and everywhere, right? Some many Muslims know that this is not true. That there are many people, in the Anglosphere, in the Western world, that do support Muslims, who do value our, religion, who have a lot of respect for us, who think that we're, great citizens, and that our religion, would be a positive factor for the West. Right? But Muslims who haven't been here very long don't realize that. They just see the, people in the Anglosphere on TV who don't like them, right? With all, with whatever stories they see, or angry posts they see on the internet. Like, I remember talking to one imam, and I'm not going to say, where he's from, but he was an imam of a mosque, and he basically said flat out, people don't like us here. And I tried to reason with him. I said, it's not that black and white. There are many non-Muslims who like Muslims, who don't have a problem with us. And he said flat out, very few, which is empirically inaccurate. I mean, yes, there are people who don't like Muslims in the West, but when you look at statistical data, there's people who support us as well. But back to my original point, these organizations, they rely on the fact that Islamophobia is, permanent, throughout our society. It permeates the whole society. It's here, there, and everywhere. If you propose solutions to lower Islamophobia, like our idea of European Muslim subcommunities, in which European descendant Muslims keep everything about their culture, everything about them, and that goes the same for First Nations converts, and the same for Latino converts, and the same for African American converts. That's a concrete solution to lower Islamophobia. If you propose this, they're going to totally lose their funding, right? And that's the problem. Like, why are we taking our advice on how to lower Islamophobia from organizations whose funding relies on its perpetual existence? Why are they the only voice allowed to determine how to address Islamophobia? When many Muslims don't agree with their tactics, where's our voice? Like, we've put so much money into this, so much government money, so much of our own money, and nobody's held accountable, right? So, and I could go on. I mean, another point is that even within the alt-right, or the conservative groups, there's a lot of discussion on Islam. And there are people that I know who are in the the far right, or the dissident right, who have a lot of respect for Islam. But if they say anything about it, they're going to get criticized by their own group. And even if they have a Muslim on, they'll be the first ones to get canned by this new hate speech bill, because they hold other dissident opinions on foreign policy and things like that. And the anti-Islam groups like Gavin McInnes and Faith Goldie, they're going to remain. But with this hate speech bill, they're definitely going to go after, the pro-Islam right, or at least people on the right who are willing to have conversations with Muslims. So, in conclusion, this hate speech bill, it's a terrible idea. It's going to stifle dawah to almost nil. It's going to make it look like we have something to hide, like we're not comfortable in addressing these controversial issues. We're going to have to watch everything we say as Muslims and da'is on the internet. It's going to ruin lives, both Muslims and non-Muslims. It's going to be a recruiting point for anti-Islam groups. And our dawah sites are going to be targeted, basically, once the conservatives get in. So it really is a slap in the face to all the da'is online who have been trying so hard to reach out, to do dialogue with the West, to explain our faith, to inshallah change how they feel about Islam. I quoted that ayah of the Quran: who is better than the one who calls to Allah and does good deeds and says, I am one of the Muslims? So what this speech bill is basically doing is telling those people, we don't even want to hear from you. We just want Islam to be an identity group that's marginalized, just like all the other identity groups, just completely stifle the progress of Islam and Muslims in the West. Right, so that's my time for today. So if you are a Muslim who disagrees with or agrees with this particular proposed hate speech bill, please, 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 please reconsider. If you're in a position of power, please lobby the NCCM or your government to stop this. Stop this insanity, because it's just going to make things exponentially worse for the Muslim community. Okay, my name is Robert from Islam for Europeans. Please subscribe to our channel, and please leave comments in the section. Let me know about it. If you disagree with me, by all means, just tell me I'm wrong. You know, explain to me how this is a good idea. You know, explain to me how this is in the Sunnah. You know, did the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, ever go to, you know, the Quraysh, the people of the Quraysh, like the non-Muslim tribal leaders, and say, I want you to fine people for criticizing Islam? Okay, the government is not your friend. You know, I mean, you know, there are, you know, I don't mean that in, you know, a hateful way. You know, like, again, the government gives us gives us many freedoms in this world, in the West, to practice our religion freely. You know, they give us a lot of, you know, they allow us to, you know, to pray in mosques. They give us so many benefits. And I think that's wonderful. But again, the policies that they're enacting is really bad. Especially this one. I mean, you know, if this gets passed, I mean, we're in a lot of trouble. I'm not just talking about my group, but you know, any other Dawa groups in the West, because we won't be able to talk about these controversial issues. So yeah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you. My name is Rob from Islam for Europeans. Please subscribe.